struggling to go to work. Filipinos are also bearing the brunt of rising fuel prices through the cost of goods. Business leaders warn this is now the bigger crisis facing the country. Melissa Lopez reports.
It's a double whammy for consumers facing never-ending fuel price hikes. They will see another round of pump price increase beginning Tuesday. This means motorists are about to pay over 28 pesos more per liter of gasoline since the beginning of the year. It's plus 40 pesos per liter for diesel, once touted as the cheaper option for vehicles. But the impact doesn't end there. The Confederation of Truckers Association of the Philippines already hiked freight rates by up to 30% in March, and more increases may come soon.
It's no longer a request. This is an appeal for us to survive. Anything that you have in the table, whether it is a food, whether it is a household things, nakarating yan sa inyo because of the truck.
It's bad news for truck drivers as well.
Around na 20% na maliliit. Yung maliliit kasi talagang tatamaan dyan eh. Nakauna-unahan. Yung malalaki, ang ginagawa nila sa biyahe, nag-aabono na sila. Nag-aabono na at hindi na kumikita para lang yung negosyo nila continuous. Siyempre, pag nagsara yung mga ating trucking, wala din trabaho yung mga driver, di ba?
Even Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship Joey Concepcion says surging fuel prices is now the more pressing concern as COVID-19 infections have declined. He says it's time for government to give more attention to addressing the fuel crisis. The truckers group says it is negotiating with importers and traders for higher freight rates. Its president Maria Zapata admits many truckers have stopped operations.
It's triple of the amount. But then we cannot request for a triple rate. Say, ang rate mo is 10,000 before. You cannot request for a 30,000 by this time. Of course, it will be rejected. Ano ba naman yung mag-increase sila ng piso per item kung ang item naman is volume items? Pag tumaas ang krudo, taas ang gulong, taas ang pyesa, taas ang maintenance, taas ang sweldo, taas pa ngayon ang premium ng PhilHealth.
Zapata says they try to cut corners wherever possible. Truckers are writing to the next administration to provide shortcuts by keeping logistics costs low to recover lost income. Melissa Lopez, CNN Philippines.
Transport officials working to speed up the rollout of the 1,000 peso fuel subsidy for tricycle drivers and operators. Our George Cahilas tells us more.
These tricycle drivers from Santa Mesa, Manila face a daily ordeal of making sure they earn enough to make ends meet for their families. Student fares are their bread and butter, but passengers are few because of limited in-person classes. Their waiting time at the terminal is around an hour and a half to 2 hours. This means longer working time to earn at least 300 pesos per day.
Tiis lang, antay lang kung kailan darating. Asahan na lang natin kung meron, di kung wala, ganun po talaga.
With little income for the day, they also need to shell out more for expensive fuel.
Magkano pong gasolina ngayon? Kakapagas ko lang, 81.
They are looking to government to provide temporary relief through the fuel subsidy. But the Transportation Department says each tricycle driver or operator will just get 1,000 pesos. Compared to their jeepney driver counterparts who receive 6,500 pesos. Even with fuel discounts for public utility vehicles, the 1,000 peso subsidy cannot fill up 2 full tanks of a tricycle with a 7-liter capacity.
Nakalagay ho dun sa sulat po ng DILG sa amin is that 1,000 pesos po. Pero ito po ay depende ho sa natitirang budget ho, syempre, na naibigay ho sa kagawaran ng transportasyon through LTFR.
The Transportation Department has already received a list of over 600,000 tricycle drivers or operators who are qualified to receive the fuel subsidy. And it is already processing the paperworks so that the payout may begin.
Asa po yun. Yung ano lang ho, yung government, syempre, meron hong pertinent documentary requirements ho yan, na hiningi sa atin ng landa. Ito po yung inaayos natin ngayon.
The Interior Department explains each tricycle driver or operator will receive 1,000 pesos because the total subsidy is only 625 million pesos. George Cahiles, CNN Philippines.
The Justice Department weighing in on the legality of Cebu Province's new face mask policy. Cebu Governor Gwen Garcia earlier issued an executive order allowing the optional use of face masks in outdoor and well-ventilated spaces. The policy overrides an interagency task force resolution on mandatory masking. But Justice Secretary Minato Guevara says an EO issued by the President, as manifested in IATF resolutions, shall prevail over those issued by local governments. Guevara explains under the Constitution, the President exercises general supervision over local governments, adding that the IATF is composed of cabinet officials who are the alter ego of the President. Cebu, however, is already working to institutionalize its new face mask policy. The optional use of face masks outdoors will become a provincial ordinance by next week. This will repeal all other face mask rules in all its towns and cities. Provincial Board member John Ismael Borgoña filed his draft ordinance today at the Cebu Provincial Board, basically adopting Garcia's EO. The board, however, failed to approve the ordinance because of a lack of quorum. But once the ordinance is approved next Monday, Borgoña says there will be no basis for the police to apprehend or penalize those without face masks outdoors and in open spaces. Well, Metro Manila could escalate from low to moderate risk for COVID-19 in 1 to 2 weeks. The Octa Research Group notes the steady increase in cases, with average infections rising by 31% or from 88 to 115 per day. The positivity rate in the region also went up from 1.5 to 2.4%. Octa says cases may rise to 300 to 400 by end June and may call for tighter restrictions. But for now, the Health Department says there is no basis to raise alert level 2 in Metro Manila.
Hindi lang cases po ang tinitignan natin. Pag tinignan po natin ngayon ang National Capital Region, yes, 14 out of the 17 cities and municipality ay meron ho tayong pagtaas ng kaso, pero hindi pa ho siya nag-translate into more severe and critical, and hospital admissions are still stable.
The DOHS reported 1,682 new cases from June 6 to 12. The 7-day average was at 240, 30.4% higher than the previous week. Now, despite lower reports of severe and critical COVID-19 cases, a kidney transplant center in Metro Manila is still limiting patient admissions. Carolyn Bonkin tells us why.
This is the hospital gymnasium, and right now it's still filled with 20 patients of all ages who can no longer fit in the regular ward.
The emergency room is also at capacity. For about 2 weeks, the National Kidney and Transplant Institute, or NKTI, has been having a sudden influx of non-COVID patients.
Still full house, so that's 20 patients that are in the gym or our basketball court, because we have no other place to put our patients now. They are all kidney patients, either kidney, urology, or transplant patients who need critical care.
The Specialty Center for Renal Health is at 82% occupancy. The remaining empty beds are reserved for COVID patients. Since June 4th, emergency room admissions are on hold until further notice. Patients who come in still get emergency care and then transferred to other health facilities. They're only admitting transplant patients with medical complications. Wilson's cousin was among those admitted on June 10th. He went straight to surgery.
4 na araw na siya hindi nakakaihi, then nakakatae. Then dinala po siya sa emergency ER para po maoperahan daw po sa sabi ng doktor, na para malabas daw po ng mga bato niya.
Only patients with manageable conditions stay in the gym that's been equipped for peritoneal dialysis and stocked with medicines.
If they're critical, we will not put them in the gym. It's only those who need mechanical ventilation that would be a problem. So when we identify such patients, we transfer them to our wards.
Hospital administrators appealing to hemodialysis centers. Avoid sending them patients if they can do the treatments like blood transfusion, or they can send patients to partner hospitals.
Dialysis facilities are capable. If they come here, they have no blood donors, they have no blood available, so they deplete the blood that's available here at NKTI, whom we want to reserve for critical patients, patients who are going to be operated.
NKTI could accommodate more patients once its newly built 35-bed ward opens this June. The hospital is also in need of about 90 nurses. Caroline Bongkin, CNN Philippines.
Over 300 people are still in evacuation centers in the town of Huban in Sorsogon after Mount Bulusan spewed ash again yesterday. The phreatic eruption took place at 3:37 a.m. State seismologists say the eruption lasted 18 minutes, but the plume was not visible in camera monitors. The latest eruption comes a week after Bulusan also spewed ash last June 5. Officials say most of the evacuees include the elderly and pregnant women. So far, the Regional Social Welfare Office says up to 11,300 people from the towns of Huban and Bulusan have been affected by the eruption. Agriculture authorities also pegged the damage at over 2.6 million pesos. FIVOC says it is monitoring 6 active vents of Mount Bulusan aside from the volcano's main crater. When we come back on Newsnight, more details have been revealed about Vice President-elect Sara Duterte's inauguration or oath-taking, including the presence or absence of some of the outgoing top officials. Plus, President Rodrigo Duterte weighs in on the country's relations with China amid disputes over the West Philippine Sea. Details after the break. This is Newsnight on CNN Philippines. President Rodrigo Duterte says he hopes to visit the West Philippine Sea after his term ends to assert the country's sovereignty over the area amid China's territorial claims. But as Tristan Odalo tells us, Mr. Duterte is treading cautiously to avoid war.
Amid tensions between the Philippines and China in the West Philippine Sea, President Rodrigo Duterte believes that a war is unlikely to happen. In a speech over the weekend, the president also disclosed a conversation he had with Chinese President Xi Jinping wherein he insists that the Philippines cannot give up its sovereignty over the West Philippine Sea.
At this late day and age of our civilization, I cannot really find a very cogent reason why a war should break out. That is why tayo sa Pilipinas vis-a-vis with China. And I am glad that they have also adopted the same behavior. We continue to talk.
Mr. Duterte also reiterated his position that the country could not go to war. He also expressed his willingness to visit the disputed area as a civilian so that he could not aggravate the situation further. In 2016, Mr. Duterte promised to go to the West Philippine Sea on a jet ski. Years later, he clarified that the statement was just part of his campaign strategy.
But we cannot afford fighting with China. We cannot win and we will lose, and the population will suffer.
Defense Chief Delfin Lorenzana says in an international dialogue held in Singapore that the Philippines is walking on a tightrope. He says the country needs to balance its relations between two superpowers. At least 3 diplomatic protests have been filed against Beijing in recent weeks. The country protested the unilateral fishing ban declared by China on May 31st. The Philippines also opposed the quote, illegal return of Chinese vessels in the Julian Felipe Reef. Manila also slams the recent incidents in Ayungin Shoal by the Chinese Coast Guard. In a statement, Chinese Ambassador Wang Jilian said that differences are expected between neighbors and the best way to handle this is through bilateral consultations. On the Julian Felipe Reef, the Chinese ambassador maintains that the area is a traditional fishing ground for Chinese fishermen and there is nothing unusual with their activities there. China maintains that the maritime dispute in the South China Sea is just a small part of the overall bilateral relations between Manila and Beijing. Tristan Udalo, CNN Philippines.
President Duterte wants the drug war to continue even after his term. He says he's passing the torch to his daughter, Vice President-elect Sara Duterte, but warns he will still keep an eye out on local officials. CN Arcangel filed this report.
I would like to appeal to everybody that drugs, especially the military and the police and the Coast Guard who are here, never give up the fight against drugs. Drug will kill the Philippines. Malapit na tayo nag-narco politics.
Fighting illegal drugs remains on top of President Rodrigo Duterte's mind, even if he has less than 3 weeks left in office. During his visit to the Metro Manila subway depot on Independence Day, Duterte said his daughter, Vice President-elect Sara Duterte, would continue the drug war. He also assured the police and military that he would take full responsibility should they face criminal charges for going after drug pushers. But even after his term ends, Duterte said his campaign against illegal drugs would continue and his focus would be on local officials.
Kung wala na ako, sabihin ko na lang kay Inday, take over. Ikaw nang kunin mo yung trabahong, biro mo yung Department of Education, maraming bata dyan. Do not ever allow contamination dyan. If you have to do it, do it.
After 6 years in office, Duterte admits his bailiwick, Davao City, has been lagging behind in terms of volume of government projects. But he explains he chose to allocate more resources to other areas out of delicadeza.
If by fortunate chance, mabigyan kami nitong bagong administration, then I would say na salamat because nahuli talaga kami.
The outgoing administration assures the construction of the country's first subway will continue under the next president. The subway, which will connect Valenzuela to Pasay City, is expected to be partially operational by 2025. CN Arcangel, CNN Philippines.
More diplomats paid a courtesy call on President-elect Bongbong Marcos, among them Russian Ambassador Marat Pavlov, who said Moscow is ready to work with Manila to address its energy demand amid the war in Ukraine.
As far as I understand, President-elect would like to continue his independent policy and to cooperate with the Russian Federation.
The president of the Asian Development Bank, Masatsugu Asakawa, also visited Marcos. The ADB vowed to support Marcos's priority projects such as the Build, Build, Build program and other initiatives for agriculture and food security. Another envoy who met with Marcos was Egyptian Ambassador Ahmed Ibrahim. Ibrahim said Marcos will consider attending the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Egypt this November. Danish Ambassador Grete Eliassen said her conversation with Marcos focused mostly on green transition and sustainability. Marcos also welcomed Israeli Ambassador Ilan Flus today. Vice President-elect Sara Duterte will take her oath on Sunday, June 19th in her hometown, Davao City. Her spokesperson, Liloan Cebu Mayor Cristina Frasco, said outgoing President Duterte will grace his daughter's oath-taking, while outgoing Vice President Leni Robredo will not make it because of Naga City's Charter Day. Former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo is among past top officials who will be present at the ceremony. No confirmation yet on President-elect Marcos's attendance. Catch our documentary, Inday Sara, the Vice President, and a pre-oath-taking special with senior anchor Rico Hizon from 3 p.m. onwards on Sunday. We'll also bring you the oath-taking of the country's 15th Vice President live, only here on CNN Philippines. Authorities have revoked the driver's license of the SUV owner in the controversial hit-and-run case in Mandaluyong. He is now banned from driving any motor vehicle. The Land Transportation Office said this was not the first time the SUV owner committed a reckless driving violation, citing at least 3 previous cases. The police have challenged the driver to surrender.
Ikaw, china-challenge kita, Mr. San Vicente. Ayaw mong sumurrender, tama. O isa lang sasabihin ko sa'yo, baka adik ka. Okay? O, ba't ayaw mo sumurrender? Because no person in his right senses will do that. Nakabangga ka na nga ng tao, imbes na hintuan mo, lalo mo pang sinagasaan.
The SUV owner again snubbed the second and final show cause order issued against him last week. In other news, the Philippine National Police standing firm it did not commit any human rights violations following the arrest of at least 93 people in Concepcion Town in Tarlac. PNP officer in charge, Lieutenant General Victor Nao, says those arrested were supposed members of militant groups. Farmers and advocates took part in an activity linked to a land dispute in Hacienda Tinang last Thursday. They are detained at the Municipal Police Office pending inquest proceedings. The PNP denied allegations the individuals are kept from being released.
Pinaghirapan ito ng ating mga kababayan na itanim. Only sisirain ng mga lukulukong to. Please do not use human rights in defending your rights there. Imagine, sinisira nyo yung mga tanim. Kung meron pong bail yan at nakapag-bail po sila, definitely they will be released. So again, you are twisting the facts. Punong-puno na po ang ating mga kababayan sa panluloko ninyo.
Police say members of the Anakpawis and Kadamay groups and 8 foreign nationals have been released. We'll take a short break, and when we return, one of the most watched shows on Netflix is officially returning for a second season. Plus, the Golden State Warriors are victorious in Game 4 of the NBA Finals to level the series against the Boston Celtics. You're watching CNN Philippines. Welcome back. If you can't send yourself to the moon, why not let your name take the trip? NASA is issuing boarding passes for Artemis 1, the first unmanned flight test of the Space Launch System rocket and the Orion spacecraft. Those who sign up for a pass online will have their names included in the flash drive aboard the vehicle going to the moon. On to sports news. The Ateneo Blue Eagles head to the step-ladder semifinals in UAAP women's volleyball after beating Adamson over the weekend. Ateneo joins NU, LaSalle, and UST in the Final Four. In tomorrow's semis opener, the Blue Eagles will face the Golden Tigresses 6:30 p.m. at the Mall of Asia Arena in Pasay. Ateneo head coach Oliver Almadro told CNN Philippines Sports Desk what the team is looking out for in the match.
Well, first of all, UST are well rested. They had a day off because of kami nag-day off pa kami. But what matters is we are prepared physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Ang kailangan namin, we have to start it right and we have to end it right. Yun naman ang nangyayari sa amin for the past games.
And the Golden State Warriors even the NBA Finals again with a 107-97 Game 4 triumph over the Boston Celtics Saturday. Steph Curry dropping a whopping 43 points for the Warriors. Action returns to Chase Center in California tomorrow at 9 a.m. Philippine time for the fifth match. Entertainment news now. It is official. Chart-topping Netflix series Squid Game is getting a season 2. In a letter to fans, director Wang Dong-yok confirmed the news and announced the return of characters like Gi-hon and the frontman, Chol Soo, the boyfriend of the infamous animatronic doll from season 1, is also set to make an appearance. Squid Game is Netflix's first Korean series to reach #1 in the U.S. Jungkook from BTS is marking the group's 9th anniversary by serenading armies with a song he composed himself. The vocalist released My You, a ballad dedicated to BTS fan base. The lyric video now has over 6 million views and counting. In celebration of their 9 years together and their new album, BTS will perform tracks from Proof tonight at 8. The event, to stream live on YouTube, will feature a special guest. The world-famous K-pop group debuted on June 13, 2013, with the release of their first single, No More Dream. And that is it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Honteveros. Before we go, we'll take a closer look at how to manage one's electric consumption all week long. The Department of Energy has designed practical and implementable programs for every sector to plan their electric use for the long term. Let's watch this.
Conserving energy is such a buzzword nowadays because you talk about sustainability, protecting the environment. When we conserve energy, we're able to extend its use and limit the deployment, for example, of conventional generating sources like coal-fired power plants. It also allows for renewable energy technologies in generation to meet our demand requirements. Renewable energy alone will not lead to a healthier and sustainable planet and environment. We need to also be mindful of how we consume, and that is where energy efficiency number 11285 is the energy efficiency and conservation act. It was passed in 2019 conservation act. It was passed in 2019. Energy efficient national way of life for every Filipino. National way of life for every Filipino. Demand side management is the process. Demand side management is from peak to off-peak. Shifting in the Philippines, we have 3 grids. One is Luzon. In the Philippines, we have 3 grids. The third one is Luzon. Here in Luzon, Visayas and demand for electricity happens from 10 in the morning. Demand for electricity in the Visayas and the Visayas happens from 5 p.m. In the Visayas and Mindanao, that happens from 5 p.m. Demand side management seeks to provide the shifting of the load from period to off-peak period. When we are able to manage the demand during this period, our existing portfolio of power generation is able to meet our demand. Hence, we do not require the need for peaking plants during that period.
In the Museum, we manage our power demand by monitoring of our building operation and equipment, and also understanding our load profile. One of the energy technology present here in the museum is our 12-unit solar assisted aircon. It uses less electricity than conventional air conditioning units, and it also uses environment-friendly refrigerant.
For Bonifacio High Street, we make sure that our lights are energy efficient, and LED lights, and we also set our timers so that in summertime when there's more daylight, we use less energy to light up the place. Helping the environment and conserving our resources is really a very important issue right now. We have to set an example that this can be done, that we can give service to our customers and to our merchants while still giving value to our resources and to our environments.
It's a misnomer that energy efficiency takes away from the convenience of our consuming public. It's more of making their use of energy more sustainable and more judicious.
Life as a new mom? Life as a new mom is exciting, but it can also be overwhelming. Now, taking steps to ensure a healthy pregnancy, safe delivery, and a strong baby can help you feel more confident as you go through this journey. But what lifestyle choices do you need to make? What can you eat? Can you still exercise? From pregnancy to your baby's first days, we'll answer your most asked questions about motherhood. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome to MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Calling all expecting moms out there. In celebration of Mother's Day, our guests are here today to give you practical and effective tips on keeping your baby safe as well as healthy. With us is Dr. May Siki Young. She's an obstetrician and gynecologist from the Makati Medical Center. Also with us is Dr. Jamie Isip Kumpas. She's a pediatrician and lactation consultant from the Medical City. If you often find yourself running on little sleep or reaching for that bag of chips, it's time to make some lifestyle changes in order to give your baby the healthiest possible start in life. Now, eating the right foods and exercising regularly can help ensure a safe pregnancy. Now, I'll start the conversation with Dr. May. Now, let's talk about someone who wants to become a mother, is starting to think of the family. What kind of diet should she think of in order to prepare herself, not just for one, but maybe for two?
This is the most common thing that women take for granted. They go to the clinic and say, Doc, I want to get pregnant, but they're obese, no? So what we do is to assess you, your risk, and tell you what you have to do. Proper nutrition is very important, exercise is very important, and age is also very important. So having the right body and health at the time before you get pregnant is very crucial. Sometimes it will affect the pregnancy.
Many, Dr. May, might feel daunted with the fact that someone becomes pregnant, they would gain weight. They're afraid of that weight, intimidating for a lot of mothers, especially nowadays. But it is normal to gain weight when someone is pregnant. What is a normal spectrum so that our viewers will have an idea on what the normal weight gain is, and of course, trying to make sure that you don't go over that expected weight gain?
The weight gain depends on your baseline weight. If you're overweight, your total weight gain should be reduced. Maybe 10 to 15 pounds the whole pregnancy. Ideal body weight, it would be around 25 to 30 pounds. If you are underweight, it can go as high as 45 pounds. That's why the prenatal checkup is very important. No? But that weight gain should not be because of junk. That weight gain should be because of eating healthy. So like a lot of vegetables ideally, fruits, not so much because the sugar content is very high. So choose well in what kinds of fruit you want to eat.
Doc Jamie, when it comes to the child, what are some of the foods that women should avoid?
We really do want to steer clear from anything that would be processed, and if it comes from unnatural food, then we don't want that. So we always stick to rainbow of fruits and vegetables, so natural food. So the things that's not like that, That's what you want to avoid. So like soda, junk food, processed food, as much as possible. We don't want canned food also. So we really want to stick to the natural food items.
Are there any specific things in the diet of the mother that they should be taking in order to prepare for, a good, nutritious breast milk for the baby?
What's important is really to just be as healthy as you can. But what's beautiful about breastfeeding is even those who are undernourished will still be able to produce breast milk for their babies. So we just want a healthy mom so that she'll be able to take care of her baby. But when it comes to nutrition and breastfeeding, just stick to the healthy food and that should be enough already.
Actually, experts say that gaining too much weight during pregnancy increases the risk of gestational diabetes and high blood pressure. This can also affect pregnant women later on in life. So they're encouraged to do some sort of physical activity every day. And there are also a number of other benefits to it. Dr. May, let's talk about this. Earlier, you mentioned how a good preparation for motherhood is that you start at your ideal weight before getting pregnant. Could you talk more about this? How important is exercise, not just before getting pregnant, during pregnancy, and during delivery?
If you are obese, we would really encourage you to lose weight first because it will affect you and the baby. And exercise, you have to start as early as possible. If you don't have any exercise though and you're already pregnant, what I do is I ask them to gradually increase the activity. So walking, swimming, you can count the steps, no? Because if you don't exercise, aside from you're eating a lot and you don't exercise, and your body will change, you will really have difficulty carrying the pregnancy. That is just the minimum. So the other things that will affect the pregnancy, which will have a bad outcome is, as you mentioned, Doc, is diabetes, hypertension, which might lead to preterm birth. And if you are very desirous of normal delivery, it might not happen if you have complications.
Enough physical activity can even prevent complications from arising. In fact, the National Institute of Diabetes and Kidney Disease reports that there's evidence that it may reduce the risk of preeclampsia. Doc May, let's talk about preeclampsia. Please explain to our viewers what it is and how common is it here in the Philippines?
Preeclampsia usually happens after 20 weeks age of gestation. It's defined as increase in blood pressure plus protein in urine. The thing about preeclampsia is we cannot really predict who will have preeclampsia and who won't have preeclampsia, but there are risk factors that you can see who will most likely have preeclampsia. So example, you have previous preeclampsia, you have chronic hypertension already, you have kidney disease, you're obese, first pregnancy, multifetal pregnancy, your chance of having preeclampsia will increase. So in the Philippines, usually the percentage of preeclampsia is around 4 to 8%, depends on where you are, no? And women who are older will have higher chance of preeclampsia.
Dr. May, earlier you mentioned that preeclampsia is one of the more common complications seen with high-risk pregnancy. Could you please explain to us at what age does a pregnancy start to become high risk? And aside from preeclampsia, what are other high-risk complications normally seen in Filipino mothers?
So theoretically, high risk is defined at 35 years old and above. Then when you are 35 years old and above, your chances of having preeclampsia is increased, during pregnancy, diabetes is increased, and also some sort of genetic problem. On top of that, the chances of having a cesarean section is also increased. But when I assess the risk of the patient, we don't only look at the age of the patient. Again, we look at the history of the patient, the weight of the patient, the physical activity of the patient. All in all, this will give you somehow a clearer view of when you're pregnant, what are the chances of you having complications, including preterm birth and cesarean delivery.
You've gone through pregnancy, labor, and delivery. Now what? When we return, tips on how to care for your newborn. We're your partner in healthcare. You're watching MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. After 9 long months, you're ready to go home and begin your life with your new baby. Now, while caring for a newborn can be challenging, it does become a little easier with the right guidance. Today, what you need to know when you step out of the hospital. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Many first-time parents may feel overwhelmed. If you're one of them, don't be alarmed. It's completely normal. We're here to help guide you through this process. Now, let's discuss some of the basics. Dr. Jamie, starting with what are tips when handling a newborn? Carrying an infant for the first time can often be nerve-wracking, especially maybe for the father.
You also have to give yourself some time to practice, no? Don't be so scared, but when you do things with a lot of gentleness and just make sure that you support the baby properly, meaning you hold the baby's neck and the head, and then you also try to cradle the baby well. Never carry the newborn under the armpits because they're not yet too strong to be able to hold that position. So always protect the head and the neck and also the back and the bottom. So you have to do it very gently.
Let's talk about changing the diapers. Of course, this is going to be a big part of a parent's daily routine whenever they have a newborn child. But what are some of the tips that new parents should watch out for, especially when changing a baby's diaper?
Actually, just make sure you have a lot in stock because especially newborns, we expect them to have these diaper changes, maybe 6 to 10, almost 12 times a day. So we want to make sure that whenever you're cleaning, you use cotton balls with some lukewarm water and always wipe towards the buttocks or towards the anus so that you don't cause any kind of infection. So make sure that when you use the cotton ball and you're wiping away, you throw that and dispose that right after you use it and then just get a new one. So we want to be able to also change as often as needed so that you can prevent diaper rash, because when the stool is in the diaper and we don't get to change it right away, then that is when since the baby's skin is quite sensitive, that is when they can have diaper rash.
Now, another common concern among first-time moms is feeding. Now, there's a lot of information out there on whether you should breastfeed or formula feed, for how long and how often to do so. Dr. Jamie, let's talk about the benefits first of breastfeeding.
The baby's immunity is not well developed yet when they're born. So the mom is able to protect that child by passing on some antibodies through the breast milk. And we've also seen that there are some babies who have lower risk of asthma, allergies, even certain kinds of cancers like leukemias whenever they are breastfed. So we also know that there are also beneficial effects to the mom who is able to breastfeed, such as a decrease in their ovarian and breast cancer risk, even for type 2 diabetes.
There are so many benefits to breastfeeding, but we'd like to point out that not all women can breastfeed. Others need to supplement this with formula. So moms, please don't be so hard on yourself if you need to do so. There's nothing really wrong with that. Dr. Jamie, let's talk about moms who have difficulty or who cannot breastfeed for one reason or another and they need to use formula. Are there any advice, moms who are using formula? Is it the same schedule as breastfeeding?
It is quite different, no? There's a very small percentage of moms who are not able to breastfeed. So they really also do need to get some kind of support. So whenever babies are breastfed, usually they don't follow a certain schedule. A lot of babies feed in clusters, like every hour for 3-4 straight hours and then sleep a bit longer. But generally, you do want to feed that baby around 8 to 12 times in 24 hours. So that's for a breastfed baby. For those who aren't breastfeeding, usually you still follow the 8 to 10 times, and you can be a little bit more scheduled when it comes to that. So it's generally every 2 to 3 hours. Around the clock.
Now, before we go to break, Dr. May, immediately after giving birth, there are some mothers who experience a phenomenon of having some form of depression. They call it maybe the baby blues. Is this something that can be prevented? Is this something that is common?
So postpartum blues is actually very common, no? So sometimes after you give birth, you get overwhelmed with everything, especially for first-time moms. They have to breastfeed, they have to recover, they have fix a lot of things, they still have to run the household. So again, the husband is very important. One thing that we obstetrician can do is to warn the patient to sleep well, to eat well before you give birth so that you have enough energy. Usually postpartum blues are just temporary, you know. You have to feed the baby every 3 hours, more or less. It's round the clock. You don't get to sleep for 8 hours. So that pagod, no? Plus breastfeeding, plus recovery, can really cause postpartum blues. So the support of the husband is very important. If you have other support system like nannies or grandparents, it would help a lot. But usually postpartum blues is temporary. In case you feel worse, usually we have a follow-up after delivery. Please mention it to your obstetrician because we can assess you, we can help you, and we can refer you to a proper doctor for assessment if we suspect that you're having postpartum depression.
Now, sometimes through no fault of your own, your baby might get sick. It's vital to know what to watch out for and how best to help him or her. When we return, the most common illnesses among babies and basic first aid for parents. Your health is our mission here on MedTalk Health Talk. You're watching CNN Philippines. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. As a parent, it's easy to feel helpless and worried when your baby is sick. But many of these health problems among newborns can actually be managed very effectively by the parents. First aid and some TLC can go a long way in the recovery of your little one. Dr. Jamie, when it comes to the baby having a fever, that's probably one of the more common things. What are some of the physical characteristics that the parent might see that their baby might do or have if ever a baby has fever? What should they do?
So what we need to do is to make sure that that baby is comfortable. And sometimes it's really about changing the temperature of the room, or what you'll notice with babies is they get very clingy, especially to their moms, because they want to breastfeed as often as possible because it gives them a lot of relaxation. Also, it gives them a lot of comfort. So those are just some of the things that you do.
Dr. May, earlier we've been talking about how important the support system is, how important the role of the father is, especially whenever there's a newborn baby. The dynamic is very important here. For the men out there, for the fathers out there who have no idea how much involved they should be, give some concrete examples on how much support a father must be in, especially when there's a new baby.
The husband should always understand that raising a child, especially babies, newborn babies, is not solely the role of the mother. So they can help by changing the diaper, let the mom sleep, or sterilize the bottles if they're using formula milk. Let the mom rest in between, and they should also wake up because the mom is also recovering. They should also understand that the mom is going through a lot of changes. So just be there. Just listen to them when they cry because they're sad. For some reason, they don't understand why they're crying. Please, husband, be very, very patient because they went through a lot just to have your baby also. So just be there and listen to them and help as much as you can.
Now, I'd like to talk to Dr. Jamie about some basic first aid when it comes to the baby. An advice, though, to the viewers here, first aid is best done if you are very familiar with trying to find out what are the warning signs that the baby does need first aid, and you have to have that skill in order to perform first aid. With that being said, Dr. Jamie, what are some red flags that the baby does need some first aid when it comes to maybe their breathing or their swallowing or the sounds that they make?
Actually, if you're taking care of your baby right on a daily basis, you're very familiar with how your baby is acting, the usual sounds that your baby is making. So anything that deviates from that, then you start to monitor and check. If it's something acutely, like if, for example, your baby is suddenly choking on something, then you will notice that there's some children who will actually turn blue right away if it's very quick with this choking episode, but there are some times wherein it's not a complete obstruction and they can make these like very high-pitched breathing sounds. One thing that I also want to point out is that many of these accidents are actually something that can be prevented. So you want to make sure that you child-proof your home quite well so that we can prevent them. So if babies are in that stage where they're putting things in their mouth, so you want to make sure that the whole area where they're at don't have small items that can be choking hazards. Also, if they start crawling already, you want to make sure that you're closing all of these plugs, sockets, so that they don't get into these accidents. So a lot of these moments are really preventable.
Before we go, Dr. May, do you have any tips, advice for the viewers out there, especially those who are thinking of having a family for the first time?
For me, pregnancy and giving birth is really something very beautiful as long as you are ready and you are also ready to the changes that you have. And please talk to your husband because this is a journey the two of you should go through, and always have a checkup. Please have a regular prenatal checkup.
And Dr. Jamie, before we go, any advice from you?
For me, I think what would really help a lot of new parents would be to take classes prior to giving birth and prior to taking care of the newborn. Aside from gaining knowledge, it also gives you a little bit more confidence and you feel that you're ready to take care of the newborn. But of course, give yourself some time to get used to being new parents and enjoy the journey. It really goes by so fast.
From the first week of your pregnancy to time with your newborn, remember, moms, to always care for yourself. A healthy you means a healthy baby. Thank you very much, Dr. May Siki Young and Dr. Jamie Isip Kumpas, for being with us today. We appreciate your time and your insights. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and we'll see you again next time on Med Talk Health Talk.
Weekdays, 6 p.m. We now go above and beyond the headlines, followed by Med Talk Health Talk.
We'll talk about how to keep ourselves healthy during the pandemic.
Politics as usual.
In this country, not everything really goes according to plan, and politics is, as usual,
Up close and more. Catch CNN Philippines Hour on DZKI-IRIGA. Weekdays, 6 to 7 p.m.
Kumakalat breaking tweet ni at hindi ito scam. All caps, gamot sa cancer. Question mark. Miracle tea exclamation. Mapa stage 1, stage 2, stage 100. First 100 emoji to DM will be healed with good hair.
Huwag paloko, mag-fact check muna. Ang totoong balita, tunog tama, dapat tama. Isang paalaala mula sa KBP at ng istasyong ito.
Click number 2. Order now. Arrow down. Arrow down.
CNN Philippines are sa RPN-DZKI-IRIGA alas 6 hasta las 7 ng manggi, Lunes hanggang Biyernes. CNN Philippines are